Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm really happy to be here, kind of sharing a little bit more about NC Idea alongside all of these other fantastic programs for small businesses in North Carolina. So again, my name is Leigh Blancato. I'm a program manager at NC Idea on our grants team. So I am this morning going to give a very brief overview of our micro and seed grants for entrepreneurs. We're in the middle of a grant cycle right now. Our next grant cycle is going to be launching in February, and we'll have a number of information sessions before that grant goes live. So if this is a program you're interested in applying for, I definitely recommend you come out and see us at an info session in January, just because there's quite a bit to go over about our programs. But just to give you a little bit of background about NC Idea. So we are a private 501c3 foundation. So we do not have any federal or state funding with our grants. And really our mission is to strengthen North Carolina's economy by supporting entrepreneurs in the state. We're really focused on empowering people in the state to achieve their entrepreneurial potential. And we do that through grant making to early stage growth-oriented companies. We also do that through programming. We also fund ecosystem partners across the state. And we also have a number of smaller grants to support networking and just community building and support across the state of North Carolina. Our impact for our micro and our seed grants specifically, we've awarded 449 grants to 418 companies since we launched the seed program in 2006. And you'll see that we've awarded more grants than companies because some companies can be awarded a micro grant and then during a future grant cycle go on to be awarded a seed grant. And 68 of our companies are still active or have been acquired. And that really is our goal with the NCA Idea grant funding, is to give companies non-dilutive funding at a really critical stage to grow and scale and extend their runway so they can then go on and be super successful. Our impact, we've also created, our companies that we funded have created over 4,000 jobs in the state and have raised a combined close to $1 billion. So micro and seed, they're smaller grants compared to some other funding partners who have talked this morning. So our micro grant is $10,000 in funding and our seed grant is $50,000 in funding. Again, these are non-dilutive grants supporting North Carolina founders that are really focused on early stage growth-oriented companies, really on the path to be multi-million-dollar. So these are, again, very early stage. Many of our companies are pre-revenue, but really in the application and through the application process, they're making it clear that they have these greater visions for a multi-million-dollar company. So in the application, we really wanted to come across that you're addressing a large, rapidly growing market opportunity. So you actually have the ability to scale to be really large, that you have some sustainable competitive advantage. So if that's IP or your team or your first to market, really what is your advantage to competitors to be able to scale, and that you have a unique value proposition for your customers. So all of those items should really come across in your application, and that'll help you stand apart from other applicants that are submitting. So a couple of eligibility guidelines, probably obvious, but companies must be headquartered in North Carolina. It's okay to have founders living outside of the state or team members outside of the state. There's no criteria around the full team being in the state. There's definitely kind of a desire for that, but it's not a requirement. So your application wouldn't be affected if you have a co-founder out of state, or maybe if you are developing your team and you have some team members out of state, that's totally fine. But really, it must be clear that your company is headquartered in the state and committed to growing in the state. And that would include all publicly facing materials during the application process. We are checking LinkedIn profiles and websites, so really make it clear that your company is in the state and growing in the state. There are a number of companies that are out of scope. I would say for the majority of folks in the room, you probably fit within our company guidelines, but I do want to point out specifically companies that have high capital requirements or really a long path to commercialization are not going to be a good fit for our grants. Our grants are not R&D grants, they are commercialization grants. And we're really looking for companies that are going, if they're not already in the market generating revenue, they will be able to commercialize during the grant period, which is typically 6 to 12 months after receiving the grant. So something to keep in mind, they're not R&D grants, they're really focused on commercialization and developing the business. So our micro grant, my colleague Alan is here this morning. So if you have any questions about what the micro mentorship program or programming looks like, he's here and would be happy to answer questions about that. So it's $10,000 grant, but we also have 8 weeks of programming that goes along with it. So it's really meant to kind of build a cohort of businesses that are kind of at similar stages. We talk about fundraising, we talk about building your network, building relationships, some customer discovery. Customer discovery is always important. Even if you think you found your customer, you should still be talking to customers. And there's a lot, we do fireside chats with other founders. We do Mentor Madness to connect with different advisors and folks who have specific expertise. So it's a really great program to help founders kind of build their network and feel ready to maybe apply for seed. Yeah.
Quick question. So these grants are more for commercialization.
Yes.
And so it's called a micro 10 and a seed. Seed would kind of represent seeding for kind of R&D. Those seem like insignificant amounts when you're trying to get to commercialization. You've already acquired and got to that point. But a seed would seem like it would represent the seeding, the early stages of development versus the commercialization by the topic or the name itself.
Sure. It really is. So I would say we're industry agnostic as far as our grants, but just because they are smaller amounts of money, we really are focused on grant impact. So if you do have a product or company that you are trying to grow and scale and commercialize, if you really do need like millions and millions of dollars to reach that commercialization stage, it's harder to make a case for grant impact with our grants. Whereas if you are a tech company, and the majority of our companies that we fund are technology companies, not exclusively, but the majority, just because it is easier to make that case for grant impact. But we definitely, and I know you'll probably hear from a number of our grant recipients in the next session, folks who utilize federal funding and then come and receive a seed grant to then commercialize their efforts. So yeah, sorry if the language is confusing. So our micro grant, it's our earlier stage companies. I would say this grant is definitely getting more and more competitive. But really these companies, they've done some customer discovery, they've done some prototyping, they probably have an early MVP that they're using with beta users. Really, the most competitive companies we see for micro are kind of establishing pilots, either paid or unpaid, to really get their product in the hands of customers and really validate certain aspects of their business. Maybe they're kind of figuring out how they're going to market their business or what sales channels they're going to use, but really validating some aspect of their business, but really have some early momentum with potential customers. And you do not need to be a full-time founder to receive a micro grant, but we do like to, in the application, get a sense that you're committed to this company and building this startup. Okay, so seed is our $50,000 grant, and it's really for companies that do have, we used to call it proof of concept. We would say initial proof of concept. So typically you have a few customers or you have pilots that have gone really well and you're ready to kind of scale those pilots. Really, seed grant is meant for companies that have initial proof of concept, have some early customer traction, whether that's paid or unpaid, but really they can demonstrate how the grant will allow them to kind of extend their runway, start generating more revenue, receive outside investment, but really extend their runway and begin scaling their company. You do have to have at least one full-time founder in North Carolina by the time the grant is awarded in order to be eligible for a seed grant. And then we'll say it just depends on the type of funding, but if you have more than $250K in annual revenue or outside equity investment, you're less likely to be considered for a grant. It's not an absolute no, but it makes the case for grant impact a little bit harder. So any companies that have less than $250K in annual revenue or outside equity investment are more likely to be considered. Any questions about that? Okay. Yeah.
It's been mentioned several times that you have to have a full-time founder or person involved with several of these grants. And I guess one question I would have is, how do you define full-time? So if somebody, I mean, most people who are really passionate about small business like this, they work 80 hours a week or 60 hours a week, you know, so really they're working 2 full-time jobs anyway.
Totally.
How do you define that?
Yeah, so NC Idea's definition for full-time is that you're working at least 40 hours a week on the startup and less than 15 hours a week elsewhere. So if that's school, consulting, another job. So 40 hours a week on the startup and less than 15 hours elsewhere. And we understand it's a really big ask, especially for folks with other commitments, with families, with kids, to kind of make full time. But that is a requirement for us just because it shows that commitment. And oftentimes the milestones that a founder will have outlined in their application, really you can only achieve those with full-time commitment to the startup.
Thank you.
Of course. So this is my last slide. Again, we have 2 grant cycles per year. Our fall cycle is currently underway. Our next application is going to be opening in February, really the end of January. So if you're interested in applying for either micro and seed, stay connected with us. We'll be doing more in-depth information sessions in January, and we'll be happy to talk to you about it then. The micro and seed application does open and close at the same time, and companies do have to decide which one they're going to apply for. You cannot apply for both at the same time. You can apply for micro, and if you're not awarded during a later cycle, apply for seed or vice versa. Kind of similar to what David was saying about kind of reapplicants. We have about 45% of our applicants each cycle are reapplicants from a previous grant cycle. So if you apply with us and get denied, I hope you read through reviewer feedback, take it under consideration, and consider applying during a future grant cycle when it may be a better fit for you. Our applications are quite competitive. For micro, we award 15 grants per cycle or 30 a year, and only about 8% of our applications are funded. For seed, we award 6 per cycle or 12 a year, and only about 5% of the applications are funded. So it is a quite competitive process. If you do get denied during one cycle, I hope that does not discourage you from applying in a future cycle if you feel like it's still a really good fit for you. But I did just want to make that, put that out there. We just did initial application decisions for our seed and micro application. We always get some folks who are a little disappointed. So we totally understand that, but we want to be a resource for you. Even if you have been declined during a previous cycle, we want to provide additional support and connect you with resources so you can still potentially apply in the future. But that's it for me. Again, my information is here. If you want to get in touch, you can reach me by email or reach me at our programs email as well. But I'm here for questions, as is Alan. I know we have a couple grant recipients in the room and at least one reviewer in the room as well, who's part of our review process. So thanks so much.